Welcome back to the hang gliding files. Today we're going to have our instructional video about basic hang gliding flying skills. Before we start, I'm going to assume that you have downloaded the widget and have it installed, and that you have mapped your controllers to be able to control the glider as defined in our previous videos. And then the next thing is I want people to not at this point yet try and go fly your local site. This is the very first thing everybody does, is they put the glider into some place that they know and they try to fly it immediately. Just hold off on that a second, and let's get through some basic concepts first. There are two basic kinds of flying conditions. One is thermals, and some sites, and not all, will allow for thermal flying conditions, and even then only when the weather and the wind allow it. Almost anywhere will generate some thermals of use by a hang glider, but don't be surprised if you don't find any. The second condition is ridge soaring. Some sites, and again not all, will let you ridge soar in the right conditions, and this is very site specific. The wind must be of a sufficient strength and from the right direction for ridge soaring to occur. This will be different for every site in the world. Hang gliders fly relatively low to the ground most of the time. Because of this, you're going to be asking the simulator to render itself at its highest level of detail. You may want to think of preloading some scenery if you want the best performance, and it's okay if you don't. You may see the scenery dynamically paint itself in as you fly, and this will have some impact on your frames per second. But before you can soar, you need to get through the basic flying lessons. We will assume that you've taken care of the where, when, and how, and have teleported yourself to the site setup area. In this case, it's going to be the south side of the point of the mountain. Well, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the time of the day to something early in the morning, which is where this site's normally flown. And we're also going to change the wind to be from the south, which is facing directly into this site. Most people tend to set the speed of the wind way too high, so try something lower than you might imagine to start with. And we're not setting any of the weather because we've used a preset already. Once you have spawned into a setup area, you can then pick up the glider and walk it over to a suitable launch. And this is completely up to you as to where this is and how you get there. Once you are on launch, you push the launch button one time and you're in wire mode, and then press many times to launch. Attempt to soar by keeping close to the top of the ridge and flying slow and steady. As you can see, the glider stays up even in the lightest of winds on a proper hill, and this hill is very smooth and very conducive to producing smooth ridge lift. We'll end the flight by flying out away from the ridge lift and go attempt to make an approach and a landing in the normal landing area. As we leave the ridge, the lift stops and we can start to descend into the landing area. We should put ourselves into the upright mode, which increases our spoilers and our drags. And as we get close to the terrain, the glider will automatically also go into the running pose as it is waiting to attempt to foot land. As we get close, you just fly close to the ground, and you let the glider slowly settle to the ground, and that's a landing. We use the teleport in the widget to teleport us right back to the setup area, and this is one way you can do multiple flights in a row. And one of the things that you notice right here is the glider is not moving forward. It can't walk forward. I have doubled the speed of the wind. And this is how that same scenario looks exactly in real life as this student is trying to move the glider forward to the launch. In the simulator, we don't have a wire person to help us move forward, but you can go sideways. So by changing the direction of the glider, you can move it sideways. And another thing that you can do is use the running key, and that will give you more acceleration into the wind. And this would show an example of what I would call the wireman launch. That is where you're fixed in place on the ground and you're just flying the wing while stationary before you actually launch. And this is an example of a higher wind launch. As you see, the glider launches almost immediately and quickly rises. This is the same hill but with a higher wind, and it produces a much better ridge lift environment. And this is an example of doing a top landing. A lot of sites support the ability to land right back up on top, and all you do is just get behind the ridge, make sure you turn back into the wind, and it's usually a very slow and gentle landing. You will also notice that on this hill we don't have a windsock, so we have to tell which way the wind's blowing by our telltale on the wire, on the front wire. And you can see that it indicates different directions when we change the wind to not be blowing straight into the hill. I have purposely set up the wind now to be downwind. You never want to try and take off in anything like a crosswind or a downwind because the glider just won't fly right. And as you'll see here in this example, it doesn't behave on launch. It's very difficult to get the glider under control. And then when we actually do launch, we're successful at getting off the ground, but barely, and we're just screaming down the hill because the wind is behind us. Normally what will happen on a crosswind or a downwind launch is you will crash. This is another example of trying to figure out what the wind is doing on your site. I've spawned onto a new mountain site and I'm trying to figure out where the wind is coming from before I launch. And this particular site does have a wind indicator on it, and I can see that the telltale is telling me exactly what the wind indicator is going to tell me. It's coming basically across and over the back. It's just not flyable right here at the moment. And here you can see we can quickly change the wind to better suit this site and make it more suitable for the type of flying that we're going to try. I also changed the month to June. We again use our ground handling tools to walk over to what looks like the appropriate launch. At this particular site, we see out in front of us a marker that indicates where the actual landing area is, and there's an alternate landing area over by the lake and a windsock. We'll talk about these in the future. And just as a reminder, this is the exact same weather preset, the exact same temperature, and all that we've changed is the time of day and the month and the direction of the wind. So the glider should have just as easy a time to stay up on ridge soar on this side as it did on the point of the mountain, but it doesn't because the air is much more textured this close to the ground on this kind of a varied geography and geometry. So this is also something that you have to learn how to do to fly hang gliders. And eventually, I just don't have enough ridge lift here at the top to stay up, and I'm going to have to head out, and I'll end up going down. Now, as I get down to the to near the Lake LZ, I'm on this very low set of ridges, and this is a set of hills we call the Sand Hills, and I've spent many hours soaring just at this level, and it's like a last-ditch effort to try and get a thermal before you have to go down and land. And again, that early training on how to ridge soar pays off when you're flying hang gliders, because this is a very common scenario where you have to scratch and work to stay up. In simulator flying, you can probably do this kind of scratching for hours if you really want to, and it's interesting. But in real life, you get really hot and really tired. This is a lot of work. Remember, hang gliding is a physical sport. So eventually, I give up and I head out away from the hill. As soon as you leave the ridge, you're going to start coming down. So that just shows what being in the right place at the right time at the hill is what keeps you up in your scratching. And all it takes is just to leave the ridge lift, and you're heading towards the landing area. Landing is the same as before. You just go upright to put in a little drag, float down into the LZ, do a little flare, and you're there. Use the widget and teleport yourself right back up to launch. And this time we've changed one thing, in that we've increased the temperature just slightly. Everything else is exactly identical. And what you should notice about this sequence is that the air is much more textured. It's got much more roughness to it, and it moves around, and the glider has to do a lot more maneuvering just to stay pointed where it wants to go. This is completely due to convection, not because the wind strength is increased. And in this next sequence, what you're going to see is a thing that we call high siding. So I'm turning to the left, but my body is completely to the right, even though I continue in a circle. And this is very typical in hang gliding, that you have to high side the glider to keep it from turning into a turn in lift. Well, next we'll show you a sequence where we start to get into some thermal lift, and that's lift that is going up because of rising hot air. And this requires different techniques, and you should be able to tell that you're in or near a thermal because you'll actually hear the airspeed or the wind noise increase as you enter into or exit a thermal. You not only have to listen to wind changes, you have to listen to your variometer. And your variometer is that device that's beeping and booping in the background, and that gives you an audio indication of your rate of climb or descent. And you try to center yourself or get yourself into the best parts of the lift in a thermal. It's not uniform throughout its size, and it's not everywhere on the mountain. It's in a very specific spot that you're going to have to find the best parts of to stay into thermal. Once you've found a thermal, there's a lot of different techniques that you have to use to stay in a thermal. You have to track it with the wind, and sometimes you might even have to reverse your direction and search around until you find it again. Once you're in a thermal, it's usually like this, that you're in a consistent circle and you're just maintaining bank and going up. But it's really easy to lose it. You can also fall off the edge of one and have trouble finding a way to get back into it. It's just techniques that need to be learned. Well, that's our intro to basic flying skills. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you like it, like and subscribe, and come back for the next video. See you on the hill.